I'm Destiny Garcia. I'm the Executive Director of Clean Slate Utah. I'm also somebody who's been formerly incarcerated. I've gone through the expungement process twice, and that's why this line of work is so important to me.
Thanks.
My name is Charlotte Waterbury, and I am Destiny's intake coordinator. I have also experienced having a criminal history, and I am currently going through my own expungement.
Very nice.
Very nice.
So what is then, give us kind of a summary or a broad overview of Clean Slate Utah.
It's easier to start with the Clean Slate Law. So
Okay.
in Utah was the second state in the nation to pass the Clean Slate legislation. And what that is that it shifts the burden from the individual to the government. And they will automatically expunge certain misdemeanor records.
Okay, interesting.
So in that is Class A drug possession, most misdemeanor Bs and Cs, and all infractions.
Okay.
It's a great law. It's going to help over 534,000 people. But the
Wow.
problem with it is there's no direct notification requirements.
Oh, so people who are able to be expunged don't know.
They will never be notified of it. So that's what Clean Slate Utah was formed for, was to raise awareness around this law, and then to also help people who may not fit in that criteria, that may have to go through a petition-based expungement for different types of charges, like different misdemeanors, felonies, things like that don't fit in that bucket.
Right.
And then also to help with pardon support as well.
Nice. So out of my own personal curiosity, the Clean Slate law that you're talking about, you're saying that law is just going to automatically expunge all of these different charges.
So-
And the problem is that these people just don't know that their charges are expunged.
Right, so
Yeah.
they still have to meet, sorry.
We'll talk over each other.
They
It's
still
gonna
have to meet the criteria of what the expungement criteria, right? So they still have to
Gotcha.
fit in that bucket of charges. So
Right.
you can't have more than 2 Class A misdemeanors, more than 4 Class B misdemeanors. So you still have to fit in the bucket to get an expungement. And a lot of people we deal with do not fit in that bucket.
Oh,
So
okay.
we help them with the court-based process as well.
Gotcha.
The biggest problem we saw with the bucket of automatic clearance charges is that now people are in the middle of the process. They can't find the charge. Did it get automatically expunged? Is it just not digitized?
Right.
So now we're having to play this game of Sherlock, where is it just that we can't find the record online? Has it been expunged? And then we need proof of the expungement. Whenever you do anything legal, you need documents of that. You need to retain everything, right? So we're going back through and trying to track down the charge. If it hasn't been expunged, what process do they need to go through to get to that point?
Because the government the law's been rolling out really slowly. So they've only
they tend
cleared
to do.
about 10 to 15% of those records so far. So they still have a lot more to go.
Gotcha.
When did this law go into effect?
It was implemented February 10th of 2022.
Oh, so very new.
It passed in 2019, but then COVID hit us all and everything was shut down. So Utah was the second state in the nation. There's now 12 states that have this law.
Wow.
New York is the most recent one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So for the viewers that may not know, walk us through why somebody would want an expungement.
So the biggest factor in having a criminal record is when you go to get housing, employment, you essentially have to explain your life, right? You have a charge from when you were 18 years old. You have to now disclose everything that you've been in the past, where you were, why you got this charge, even if you're a completely different person, right?
Right.
My criminal history is from many years ago, and I still have to give kind of a disclaimer, right? Hey, this is my past, this is who I am now, and hope that people will look past that. When you get it expunged, it's almost like a new lease on life. You no longer have to disclose that you've had a criminal history. You can make more money. You can get better housing opportunities. Within the first year of someone having their record expunged, they make 20% more
Oh, wow.
on their income. So it opens up massive opportunities. Not only that, but if you go back to school, when you go to get your master's, you have to talk about this. You have to go through all of your charges to further your education, which is just frustrating and really embarrassing.
You have to disclose charges to get into a master's program?
When you graduate to get your double licensing, your
Oh.
Department of Professional Licensing.
Right.
If you have a criminal record, you have to sit down and explain each and every charge to them in order to get that license.
Wow.
Which a lot of people in our community are recovering from substance misuse disorder, and they're going to be social workers or counselors to work in that field, and they all have criminal records.
Right. I mean,
And
it makes a lot
barrier.
of sense, right? You got these people who this is like a passion of theirs because it's so heavily impacted their own life, and now you're saying, hey, we're going to put up a bunch of roadblocks and make this really difficult for you to participate in
Yeah.
this and make this better.
And not only that, but explain explain yourself, right? Like there's a lot of decisions we make when we're younger, or if we've suffered from an addiction, you make a lot of choices you're not super proud of.
Right.
And now you have to explain that 10, 15, 20 years later, and it's just not, I mean, for me, it's just not fair. You're a totally different person. It doesn't matter what qualifications you have, you still have to disclose this information and hope and pray that you can get past HR or get past the hiring and actually get to a job that you know you're qualified for.
So you're saying, you know, I'm a totally different person, whatnot. Your vast clientele, are you talking about somebody that they did something when they were younger and now they've gone through the system and grown up a little bit? Is that kind of your typical clientele?
We have a variety of different people. We have people that have been crime-free for 20, 30 years. They just lost their job because of COVID, and now they're trying to get a new job, and they can't because of their criminal record.
Right.
We have people that are fresh in recovery and are still in a waiting period, and we're trying to help them get them to the end of that waiting period.
Gotcha.
We have lots of single moms, dads, people working 2 and 3 jobs to support their families because they can't get one decent job.
So do you provide like additional resources, it sounds like, as well? So like for the people that are on the waiting, or in the waiting periods, so to speak, like those people, you'd be providing additional resources or trying to connect them to the right resources?
Yeah. We always want to
That's really
have
cool.
them, this is what we say, we want to keep you at a clean slate until you qualify. So what resources are you struggling with now that you may need to keep you on the right path so that when your waiting period is over, we can apply for that expungement?
Right.
I think one of the really wonderful things about my job is that I get to screen people, right? So individuals that are looking into this, and it usually is people who are in recovery, who have changed their life. I am an individual in recovery, so the people that come through are saying, hey, I've cleaned up my life, this is the last thing hanging over my head, and that's super empowering, because if you can get away from that, a whole world of opportunity has now opened. But I've also had individuals come through that had a charge from the 80s. That is, they're trying to go serve a mission in another country and they can't because of this charge. I've actually been really surprised by the full gamut of people that have come through, because you would never guess.
Right.
And 1 in 4 Utahns has a criminal history.
Yep.
So we see everybody, and it's really important to keep an open mind and not really take a look at the charge and just help people as people, because a lot of times people will end up with charges that have no bearing on who they are as a person or what they were even doing. Unfortunately, our justice system is a little broken. We're a lot broken.
Yes. I am not a representative, but I do work for the Department of Corrections, which I see that, and I see that in a big way too. I empathize with the same problems that you guys deal with, because on the Department of Corrections side, we don't have any bearing over what the courts have done. We don't have any bearing over, from point A to point B, when they have their first interaction with a law enforcement officer, something goes wrong. Now they're in the justice system. Now they're going through the court system. Now they've got the sentence. They're going to prison. That's where we come in, right? And so there's all of this stuff that has happened beforehand, and it makes our job really difficult. And so I'm sure in the same light, it makes your job really difficult. Not only do you have all of these different roadblocks being put up by state agencies, or seemingly so, whether it be intentional or just because of bureaucracy and red tape and all that sort of goodness. It's a struggle. It's a struggle individually, and I definitely appreciate that you guys are able to kind of bring that into an organizational structure and help these people with it, because it is not an easy thing to deal with, the justice system.
It's also a really long process, right? Even once you know what path you need to take, it's a journey. Every court is different. Every police department is different. So you're jumping through different hoops for every organization that you work with, to get your police reports, to file your dockets with your court. Every court is different. Every court clerk is different. So that presents another barrier, and you need a lot of patience to get through it. And our goal and our hope is that by having a resource and someone they can call and get support, ask questions, they're going to make it further through that process.
Right.
And we have now been starting to get results as well, which is incredible. In the past, something like 80% of people who started the expungement process did not complete it.
Right.
We're now to a place with our organization that we are getting people reaching out saying, hey, I got all my stuff expunged. And that's incredibly exciting for me as someone who has helped support them, but also for our state, for our economy, for everything. It's a really big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, expungement is good for everything.
Yeah, it's good
It's
for
good for
everyone.
families.
It's a win-win-win, right?
It's good for our economy. It's good for our neighborhoods. It's good for public safety.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good all the way around. It's
Yeah.
a common sense. Common sense.
But if I could have you guys back up just a little bit, because you're along with what you're saying, the expungement process itself is very confusing. Okay, and you're right. Every single case is a little bit different, and the kind of the flow chart that you have to go through to even get to an expungement is very different. Briefly walk us through some of the kind of the process of going through and getting an expungement.
So first step is to get screened and to see what you're eligible for, right? So we are lucky that I'm able to do my job with a website called Rasa Legal. They are a legal tech company, and essentially it takes your criminal history and puts your charges into categories or buckets of what you may qualify for. So if you meet with an intake coordinator, we screen you, let you know what you may be eligible for, and then kind of let you know, hey, the first step is to apply to BCI, right? Through that process, roadblocks can pop up, right? If you have unpaid fines, you're stopped in the process, dead in the water until those are paid. Or if you have an open plea of abeyance or something that we didn't find immediately, that's going to be a barrier too.
And then after you apply to BCI, you have to wait 4 to 5 months for a determination letter from them to get your certificate numbers.
Gotcha.
So that's just a waiting period. And
Right.
since expungements are up 300%, BCI is backlogged to about 5
For those of you
months.
that don't know, BCI is Bureau of Criminal Investigations.
I figure everybody knows our lingo.
That's like you step into criminal justice and it's like, oh yeah, the DPS, UDC,
Yeah,
A, B,
yeah.
C, D, E, F. And it's
Yeah.
like,
What?
the fuck?
I mean, the reality is when I started this position, I had tried starting my own expungement and I had jumped shipped because it feels very intimidating, right?
Right.
The verbiage, the language used is almost by design to intimidate, right?
Right.
Well, it's legalese, right? Like it's just something that it's like, unless you speak it, it's a completely
I have no
different
idea
language.
what you're talking
Yeah.
about. I think one of the biggest things for me when I started was realizing how many people have dismissals, right? How many people went to court and had a judge throw it out and essentially say, hey, this is going to drop off your record, complete the plea of abeyance, it'll fall off. This terminology that is not accurate at all. So a lot of people have dismissals without prejudice. It doesn't matter. It's going to be on your record. It may eventually fall off automatically, but the vast majority of the time people are under the impression that those dismissals are not on their record, and that's just not the case.
Interesting. So I don't know anything about that. Again, correction side, I don't deal with the courts.
Way different.
I'm really happy that I don't have to deal with the courts.
Yeah.
So in that, you're saying dismissal process, like, is that something where it's just the judge's discretion, they can dismiss it, and then it's like a certain, do they have different thresholds of dismissal? Is that why it may or may not, or is it based off of the crime?
So a dismissal is generally with or without prejudice. Without prejudice, the judge cannot try it again, correct?
Right. And with
Okay.
With prejudice, if the judge were to get new evidence, he can try
it's
it
the
again.
opposite.
Opposite.
So with prejudice,
Listen to
This
this.
is really confusing.
it is.
It is.
Either way, it's just depends on the wait period. One is 30 days, one is 180 days.
Okay,
but they
gotcha.
both can be expunged right away, pretty much. A lot of times when people are in specialty drug court programs or a mental health program
Right.
or a family drug court program, their charges will be dismissed upon completion of that program.
So they actually, okay.
And then
gotcha.
people don't
And
realize
it's an
that they need
accountability
to.
thing.
Right.
Right.
You complete your treatment, you do everything that's what you're supposed to do, you become self-sufficient again.
Right.
And then they dismiss the charges, but what they don't tell you is that they still show up on a background check as a dismissal.
Until you go through the expungement
Right,
process.
right.
Gotcha. And it seems like historically the expungement process is more of it, at least the way my internal bias runs. It's like expungements are for rich white people, right? It's like
If you have money.
you pay a lawyer, they go do everything for you, and then boom, bada bing, you're expunged, and you can go get a job anywhere, and no one knows what happened.
Which
Right.
is extremely expensive.
Yes, yes, it is.
And that still holds true, but there is now opportunity for less expensive attorneys, right? ERASA is the cheapest attorney available for expungements and 402 reductions.
Gotcha.
But it is very possible to do on your own, especially with resources and individuals who have been through the process. Everybody on our team has been through their own expungement process. So it's a matter of lived experience.
Right.
So you can call and ask questions and say, hey, what do I do on this part, right? Most of the information that you need for your petitions is given to you from BCI. The only thing you do not have is your judge associated with each case, and we can give that to you, give you just a sample of the document. And once you kind of just see an example of it, it no longer has this big shroud of mystery, and there's so much anxiety around, am I going to do it incorrectly, and they're going to reject it. So it is still possible to do without having to pay an attorney, but there are now other fees associated, right?
Right.
So that's becoming a barrier again. And we try to let our people know when they're coming through, and applicants know, hey, this is coming up. in 4 or 5 months when BCI responds to you, start squirreling aside some money, right? Because for every charge you submit to the court to expunge, it's $150.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So there used to be a law in place for the last year. It was a pilot program where the cost of expungement was only $65. But it was only for 1 year. It just sunsetted
Okay.
in June.
Gotcha.
So now it's about $280 per case to
Wow.
expunge. And that's just in government fees. That's not getting a lawyer.
So
at
that's
all.
just administrative fees.
It's just government fees. So we are in
Wow.
a communication with the representatives to try to find a middle ground between no fees and some fees. We had a great meeting about it today. Hopefully we'll get lower fees
Right.
come in the next legislative session.
So you guys aren't just doing the expunge. You're not just
Oh, no.
helping people with expungements and resources. You're doing legislative. You're lobbying for legislative change
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I'm everywhere. I travel all over the place to speak. I go to Dallas, to Texas, I was just in Washington D.C. last week. Was it last week?
Yeah.
The week before with the
Wow.
NBA doing a town hall about the Clean Slate Law.
Right.
And raising awareness about that. That'll be aired on CNN sometime this month in August.
Wow, that's awesome.
But we do much more than just expungement. So we also fundraise to help people with those government fees.
Right.
So it's going out to, one of our biggest partners is the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation.
Oh,
They've given
awesome.
us a huge chunk of money to help just with government fees to help people through the process until we can find a legislative fix for it.
So you guys are a nonprofit then?
We are a
You guys
nonprofit. We
okay.
have no
Yeah.
lawyers on staff,
Right.
but everybody on my staff knows how to do it.
Right.
So with the fees coming back as well, when Destiny started as our executive director, she increased the poverty level or the amount of people that we could help as far as financially. It previously was, I think, 200% or below federal poverty limit, and then we could help with your application fee and some of the other subsequent fees. That is now increased to 300%. Destiny bumped that up as soon as she started, so we are now able to pay for the vast majority of people that come through. The unfortunate reality is when you have a criminal history, you're not making top dollar. Before I started on with Clean Slate, I was working at Hires because that is the only job I thought that I could get. And that is not a high-paying job. I was super, super grateful for the work, but it is very hard to afford these government fees when you're making 10,
When you can barely
13.
scrape by
Right.
already.
I mean,
Yeah.
even when you have a decent job, you can't.
Yeah.
When I was going through my expungement, I was working in the county mayor's office at a government job and making $43,000 a year.
Right.
My expungement was over $3,000. I didn't have an extra $3,000 in my savings
Yeah.
after rebuilding my life from homelessness, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have that in savings. So the office did a fundraiser to pay for my expungement.
Oh, wow.
So that's why I raised the limit, is because I was in a government agency working for the mayor and I still couldn't pay for it.
Yeah.
And so people don't have that story.
Yeah.
People don't get that opportunity like I got. And it's important to raise those limits so we can help a lot more people.
If you'd like that clip and would like to watch another one, click right here. If you'd like to watch the whole video, click right here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.